happens, it is focusing on how to monitor a ceasefire that does not yet exist. On the other hand, it is adding new conditions aimed at paralyzing Kiev's ability to resist. One of its demands is that its allies stop the flow of both arms and intelligence to Ukraine. The only ray of hope for Ukrainians is that the United States has not yet agreed to any of these. They can also point to this call as proof that Russia is not interested in ending its occupation. But all this talk will bring Ukraine minimal relief from its suffering. It must also be disappointing for U.S. diplomacy. Kiev's European allies refuse to end military aid. The leader of the United States said that this hour-long telephone conversation went very well. Zelensky, for his part, after what he described as a positive, frank, and meaningful conversation, issued a statement saying that he believed lasting peace could be achieved this year under the leadership of the United States. Prior to this meeting, Zelensky said that Putin had rejected a comprehensive ceasefire. The United States and Russian leaders met the previous evening and agreed not to strike energy and civilian infrastructure targets for 30 days, a decision Moscow has allegedly failed to abide by. The previous day's phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin to find a solution to the war in Ukraine did nothing to ease the crisis that has kept the world on edge, but only created more chaos. Even the only noteworthy clause of the phone call, that neither side would strike the other's energy infrastructure for 30 days, failed to materialize. Trump continues to believe that he can persuade Putin to make peace and will send a delegation to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia next weekend to sit down with the Russian side again. Immediately after the Trump-Putin meeting, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was the first to react, saying, "I don't want to insult anyone, but we Ukraine don't want to be fodder for Putin's appetite. I don't think it is right that our fate is decided without us. We did not agree with anyone that this is how things will be done." Zelensky also stated that Trump would call him after his 2.5-hour phone call with Putin and give him clearer information. "A week ago, our delegations worked successfully in Jeddah. Now I want to meet with him and discuss the new steps we will take after the phone call the day before." Pointing out that Putin's promise to Trump not to hit Ukrainian infrastructure for 30 days was broken the night before, Zelensky said, "Although the Russian side promised a ceasefire, it again targeted civilian infrastructure on our territory with over 100 kamikaze drones." A few hours after the Putin-Trump meeting, there has been no statement from Russia about the attacks. Both Ukraine and Russia say their attacks are aimed at destroying infrastructure important to each other's war effort. They directly hit the hospital in the Sumy region. In addition, the capital Kyiv and 15 of our cities were attacked. Yesterday evening, the expected phone call between Zelensky and Trump took place. On the other hand, Trump said that the United States would intervene if the Ukrainian war turns into World War III. Saying that the ceasefire efforts in Ukraine were made to keep the United States military out of the war, he said, "Look, we're doing this. The Americans are not involved. In a funny way, if World War III happens, the American military might get involved. But strange things happen," he said. Russia's defense ministry claimed that they were following Putin's order not to strike energy infrastructure in Ukraine. In a written statement, it was emphasized that 7 drones launched in the direction of the Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv were remotely destroyed immediately after Putin received the order not to hit energy infrastructure targets during the Trump phone call. The 30-day pledge by Russia and Ukraine not to strike each other's energy infrastructure is actually more in Russia's favor. The Russian side has already destroyed Ukraine's infrastructure over the past 3 years. In recent months, the Ukrainian army has targeted oil refineries and fuel depots inside Russia, inflicting even greater damage on Moscow. Since the full-scale invasion in February 2022, Ukraine has used long-range fighter jets to strike Russian oil infrastructure, such as refineries, to inflict damage on a much larger enemy that has been raining missiles and drones far behind Ukraine's front lines. In particular, Russian strikes have hit power plants in Ukraine, causing massive blackouts. And more recently, natural gas production facilities have seen the same effect. At the same time, Russia and Ukraine exchanged prisoners yesterday following the meeting between U.S. President Trump and Russian leader Putin the previous evening. According to the Kremlin, Russia handed over 175 prisoners of war and 22 seriously wounded soldiers to Ukraine. Ukraine returned 175 Russian prisoners of war in return. Russia said it was returning the wounded Ukrainian prisoners as a gesture of goodwill. "We are grateful to all our partners, especially the United Arab Emirates, for making today's exchange possible," Ukrainian leader Zelensky said. noting that one of the largest prisoner of war exchanges had taken place. As we mentioned earlier, hours after Putin agreed on an infrastructure ceasefire in his meeting, attacks between Russia and Kiev took place. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that American troops could be involved if Russia's war on Ukraine turns into World War III. A Russian drone strike on Tuesday night damaged 2 hospitals in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Sumy, causing no injuries but forcing the evacuation of patients and hospital staff. Regional officials said. The regional governor, Mykola Kalashnik, said on Wednesday that a 60-year-old man was injured and several houses were damaged in an attack by a Russian-made drone on the area surrounding the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Zelensky said Russia had launched more than 40 drones against Ukraine following the meeting between Trump and Putin. Zelensky and his officials said Moscow had launched attacks on several other Ukrainian regions, including the Kiev region surrounding the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Ukraine's military said on Wednesday its air defense units shot down 72 of 145 drones launched by Russia in overnight attacks. He added that 56 drones were lost, referring to the Ukrainian military's use of electronic warfare to guide them. Zelensky said that one of the first steps towards ending the war completely could be to end attacks on energy and other civilian infrastructure. I supported this step and Ukraine confirmed our readiness to implement it, but it did not happen as expected. However, Rubio and Waltz's statement did not say that the ceasefire would include civilian infrastructure, as Zelensky suggested. And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt declined to answer questions at an afternoon press briefing at the White House seeking clarification on the discrepancy in details. Asked if a possible minerals deal between the United States and Ukraine was still on the table, Leavitt said that both sides had given up on it because the conflict was now moving towards a potentially longer-term peace agreement. The White House also rejected Kremlin demands that the United States stop sending intelligence and weapons to Ukraine. Leavitt said Wednesday that all intelligence sharing between the United States and Ukraine will continue. These developments come after Moscow and Kiev accused each other of launching airstrikes against civilian targets and infrastructure. It is less than 24 hours after Putin told Trump he would halt attacks on Ukraine's energy system for 30 days. Zelensky said in a statement that he and Trump had instructed their teams to resolve technical issues related to the implementation and expansion of the partial ceasefire, and that they would meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to continue coordination of steps towards peace. According to Rubio and Waltz, Zelensky asked Trump to provide additional air defense systems, including Patriot missile systems, to protect civilians in Ukraine. President Trump agreed to work with him to find out what is possible, especially in Europe, the two officials said in a statement. Rubio and Waltz said Trump and Zelensky also discussed Ukraine's electricity supply and nuclear power plants. The United States, with its electricity and utilities expertise, can be very helpful in operating these plants, Trump said. American ownership of these plants would be the best protection for this infrastructure and the best support for Ukraine's energy infrastructure. In sum, the much-publicized Trump-Putin meeting did not create a breakthrough in the Ukrainian peace process, but it may have helped it move forward. Of course, this depends on both sides refraining from attacks on infrastructure for the next 30 days. And in the hours immediately following the agreement, both sides appear to have resumed attacks. Therefore, there is currently no guarantee that the agreement will hold. If Moscow and Kiev stick to it, the agreement to cease attacks on infrastructure will be a significant concession for Russia. Because while Ukraine will also cease its attacks on Russian infrastructure, Russian attacks on Ukraine's electricity system have been far more damaging and valuable to the Russian war effort. Hence, Russia's refusal to accept such a moratorium when Ukraine and France first proposed it last month. A pause in these attacks would also limit civilian casualties in Ukraine, many of which have been a side effect of Russian attacks on infrastructure. Trump did not accept Russia's previous request that the United States halt arms supplies to Ukraine during the ceasefire. Russia, on the other hand, continues to reject the United States. Ukraine's call for a comprehensive 30-day ceasefire because the war on the ground continues to run its course. We do not yet know the exact figure of Ukraine's losses in its latest defeat at Kursk, but it seems significant. Having driven the Ukrainian army out of the thin slice of Russian territory it still holds, Moscow will be free to send all its reserves to its offensive in Donbass. How far and how fast this will go is impossible to say. U.S. military aid to Ukraine has resumed, and European aid is continuing. But the advantage is undoubtedly with Russia. At best, Kyiv can hope to continue the pattern of last year, when the Ukrainian army retreated very slowly from one position to another, inflicting heavy casualties in the process. but the possibility of a much bigger Ukrainian defeat cannot be ruled out. That is why the current approach of the European Union and the United Kingdom to the peace process is very dubious from Ukraine's point of view. Because the European Union may eventually have to play a critical role in persuading the Ukrainian government to accept what would be a painful peace deal under the best of circumstances. Instead, all the talk at the moment continues to be about a coalition of the willing, providing a strong peacekeeping force as an essential part of a peace agreement. This is certainly not going to happen. Many European Union governments are openly opposed to it. The Russian government has repeatedly rejected it and insisted that the peacekeepers be from neutral countries. Even the British government, which is working with France to set up such a force, has stated that it would only be possible with a backstop or guarantee of armed support from the United States. Trump rejected this. What this British and European project could do, however, is to encourage the Ukrainians to maintain it as part of a solution, if not as a real objective, then as a bargaining chip to try to extract concessions from Moscow and other areas. But this will depend on the Russian willingness to negotiate, and if they don't see this as a serious threat, why should they? Meanwhile, on the battlefield, time is not on Ukraine's side. It is therefore hard to see why any of the serious European allies would think that this empty proposal for a European force is to Ukraine's advantage, as opposed to a politically bankrupt institution posing for the residue of domestic advantages. Russia continues to insist on a halt to Western military aid to Ukraine for the duration of a full ceasefire, which could be seen as compensation for the military advantage Russia would give up. The Trump administration may agree, but the Europeans certainly will not. Moscow also wants as many aspects of a peace agreement as possible to be precisely defined before agreeing to a ceasefire. Trump and Putin talked about the need to improve United States-Russia relations, a radical difference from the current European discourse on Russia and an important goal for Moscow. However, the problem for Russia, as one Russian analyst told me, is that any agreement with the United States has a shelf life of 4 years. In other words, a new United States administration after the next elections could tear it up. This is another reason why the Russians try to make any agreement as formal, detailed, and internationally legitimate as possible. Putin is also reportedly pressing Trump to recognize Ukraine's annexed territories. Close sources report that President Vladimir Putin is pressuring U.S. President Donald Trump to recognize Russia's annexation of Ukrainian territory in exchange for a promise not to seize any more territory. Russia declared annexation of Ukraine's Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk regions in September 2022 after sham referendums, but has never fully controlled any of them. Moscow also annexed the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. According to the sources, ongoing negotiations between the United States and Russia to end the war in Ukraine are focused on securing Washington's recognition of all 5 regions as Russian territory, on the grounds that it is not possible to undo what Russia has achieved. Sources quoted Putin's message after the annual Congress of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, saying that if this recognition takes place soon, Russia will have no claims to Odessa and other Ukrainian territories. Putin and Trump did not discuss the possibility of the United States recognizing Russia's annexation of Ukrainian territory. During their phone call on Tuesday, the Kremlin said on Wednesday. Putin agreed to a 30-day pause in attacks on energy infrastructure, but the meeting between the two leaders failed to produce a broader ceasefire agreement between the two warring sides. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he supported the limited ceasefire, but added that he believed Putin's rejection of a broader agreement showed that the Russian leader was not ready for peace and was still trying to weaken Ukraine. On the other hand, Trump's obsession with Putin has cost the United States a major deal. Shaking up America's longest-standing alliances is starting to cost the United States military-industrial complex dearly. American arms manufacturers have been left out of the European Union's massive defense spending plan announced on Wednesday. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said, "We must buy more European goods, because this means strengthening European defense technology and industrial base." Britain was similarly left out of the deal. Instead, the European Union chose South Korea and Japan to join the military program, which aims to spend more than $800 billion by 2030 as the bloc prepares for a possible conflict with Russia. The American arms manufacturers' sales pitches are not as convincing as under previous administrations. For decades, buying American fighter jets and weapons came with the added bonus of United States protection. But as global leaders witnessed Donald Trump challenge long-standing military treaties and attack U.S. allies, this promise no longer feels like a guarantee. Trump's shocking hostility toward Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during critical peace talks, his absurd trade war, his threats to annex Greenland, his abrupt decisions to suspend and remove military resources and intelligence to Kiev, and his insistence on making Canada the country's 51st province have called into question the credibility of American protection. And European countries are not the only ones considering canceling American contracts. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced on Wednesday that Lockheed Martin is reviewing a $13.3 billion contract for dozens of F-35 Lightning II stealth fighter jets from 2023 for geopolitical reasons and the possibility of significant alternative aircraft production in Canada. Portugal announced similar plans last week, apparently wavering on whether to replace its aging air force with American-made products. In sum, foreign sales are vital to the United States arms industry. Historically, 2/3 of European Union defense spending has gone to American contractors. Losing this could have consequences for the United States economy. So, what do you think about this issue? We would appreciate it if you indicate in the comments. Thank you for watching us. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like to support us.
It is Monday, March 24th, and Bill Maher.
We have done it again. We have entered a pro tournament here in Florida. And guys, we're riding this little wave right now. We just came off the Creator Classic win. I looked on the website the other night and I was like, I want to enter a pro tournament and just see what happens. Just see where my game stacks amongst all these great players today. This is a tour here in Florida. So these guys are very, very good. A lot of notable names in the field today. And by the end of this video, you will see where I placed on the leaderboard. And we'll talk about the names and everything. So let's go get warmed up. We're heading over to the first tee in about an hour. So little warm up. 10th tee we start on. 18 holes today. Let's see what I shoot in a pro tournament. Tees, man. That's what I need. I don't want to take you guys out of business, but I need a lot of tees, Steve.
Go grab them, spread them around.
There we go. Yeah, I played here, but I've also played with Pat all the time.
Oh, okay.
Ironically, we got paired together today, which is crazy. I got a stripe. I put a little red dot on it.
Dude, like a 6.
There we go. Pat's actually my buddy. We play all the time together. We somehow got paired together today. Like, completely random got paired together. Look at this golf swing. It is so good. Thank you.
Gentlemen, have a good day.
All right, guys. We're off. I'm starting to like that feeling now, Sky. A little heart pumping, get the blood going there on the first tee. Surprisingly, we played one like a year ago, one of these minor league events, and I was freaking out on the first tee. That one, like, pretty controlled there. I think it's from the Creator Classic. 105, playing 109. Uphill, downwind. See, that's the beauty of golf. 105, it's playing up to 109, but we're on a downslope, and I don't know if the wind's going to knock it down, so it's a beautiful game. There's so many variables. I think we can hit a 56 here. Okay. A lot of cheddar cheese on that one. A lot of cheddar cheese. This right here is one of the biggest full circle moments of my life. If you look at that range right there, they're doing some production shoot right now. Behind there, you see all those range balls and the things out there? That's basically where I learned golf. right on that range there. My first couple swings were in Pennsylvania, and my dad used to teach here. At this golf course, he used to teach. And that's basically where I learned golf, which is, like, I didn't even think of that.